main objects that the forms are for, but are related to them.
You want to say that again?
Um, uh,
No.
Yeah, it's to get attributes for objects that are not the main object that you're creating or editing, but objects that are related to
Okay. So could we call them like child objects?
that. Sure.
So we kind of have this like parent-child relationship. Yesterday we used the example of we had people and shirts, right? So the goal was to create both people and shirts and be able to associate shirts with people all kind of in one easy way. That was like the overarching goal of, like from a feature perspective, what we were trying to do. Has anybody heard of nested resources? You have? And what is your understanding?
I believe that my understanding is that for the in the route section, I believe that you can so the resources represent all of the URLs that match with your control actions.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we have, I guess, the parent resource, we can nest the child resource inside the parent in order to connect them through the URLs.
Yeah, absolutely. So all through Rails, we have this idea that we have associations between objects, and usually it's this kind of like parent-child relationship. In this application, I just do this on Slack if you want to follow along. I have like a kind of like a blog. So in my blog, I'll show you the data model. A publisher is kind of like the top-level object. A publisher has many blogs, so maybe the publisher is like Gawker Media, right? And they have like a bunch of blogs, right? So maybe one of the blogs is Lifehacker. And then a blog has many posts. And publishers have many blogs. Publishers have many posts through blogs. Blogs have many comments. So it's kind of like this expanding model of like everybody has many kind of the sort of like child, right? So if we look at a blog, blogs have many posts, they have many comments through posts. If we look at a post, posts have many comments. And if we look at comments, it's kind of like the end of the line. Comments don't have many of anything. So the question becomes like, how do we create objects that are associated with one another? Do we want to use this strategy of using like nested resources or accept nested attributes? So this is actually like sort of a false comparison, and it's the reason that I bring it up. A lot of people would ask me, is it better to use nested resources or accept nested attributes? It's kind of the wrong question. The real question to ask is like, what are we trying to do? So in the case where we're trying to, as Dylan put it, we're trying to create two sets of objects and associate them together all at the same time in one form, we would want to use accepts nested attributes. In the case where we want to add things to a collection of already existing things, we want to use nested resources. So that's like the high level. That may be too abstract, so let's talk through an example. So in my example, the super common thing that ends up happening is something like we have comments on a blog post. So right now, all I did was I generated, I think I need to run my migration. No, I probably don't actually. I have a scaffold for blogs, comments, posts, and publishers, and then I just created the association. So that's all that's like really happened so far. So if I look at my routes, oh, I never changed this. My routes are just like the resourceful routes that got generated when I created these scaffolds. So I should be able to boot up a server. Yeah. And then I should be able to ask what my routes are. Let's still have our server running somewhere. I'm getting like a cached result here. Oh. Need to run my migrations. Sorry, I regenerated a scaffold a second ago, and I think that made it look like there's a migration that hasn't run yet. So don't ever do what I just did. There we go. Okay, so here are all my routes. These are all the routes that were generated by my scaffold. So by going into routes, I'm generating the resourceful routes for comments, posts, publishers, blogs, which are the 8 sort of like RESTful routes for managing each resource. So hopefully everyone is pretty comfortable with this idea at this point. But what I want to do is I want to be able to associate sort of comments with posts. And so what I'm going to do is nest comments under posts. Because right now, I'm going to make the argument that if I go to /comments and I see the list of all comments, this is not that helpful, right? I don't imagine that there's some web app like Reddit or something like that where you just go to Reddit and you say, show me all of the comments without any context, right? Just all of the comments is not really that relevant. Comments don't really exist or make sense without some context in most applications, right? In most applications, probably people are commenting on some particular comment thread, right? Or some post or a photo or something like that. So a comment, like, or just showing all of the comments that are not scoped to some particular resource kind of doesn't really make any sense. So what I want to do is I want to give my app some context and not like be looking at comments kind of just in the wild and just saying, oh, here like is an individual comment. Really what I want is I want to say like, well, what are all the comments for a specific post? So if I want to be able to do that, I can use this idea of nested resources. So I just go like this. I nest it inside a block, and then I can regenerate my routes. So now what I get is all of my comments routes are basically nested inside this post resource. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to say not just I want to see the first comment. Really what I want is I want to be able to see all of the comments scoped to one particular post. So again, like comments just in their own don't really make any sense. I want to scope them to a particular post. So what I want to do is I want to have a URL that tells me what's the resource that I'm talking about, what's the ID of that resource, and then what's the sort of RESTful thing I'm doing with the comment. So as soon as I switch to this new route, which was correctly generated with my nested routes, I get a problem. So the problem that I get is it says undefined method comment path. Does anybody know what the method comment path is, or where it would come from, or why or how it got there? So if we go to the Rails routing guide, this is probably the thing that I reference the most in all of the guides. Make this your friend. So this tells me what are all the routes that get generated when I type in resources photos. So again, we said like Rails does all this magic for us. In Sinatra, we used to have to list out all these routes manually. If we type resources, Rails will auto-generate all these routes for us, right? And I keep going to this routing chart to see all the routes that got generated for me. And on the left side, I see the helpers that Rails gives me when I do these resourceful routes. So before I changed my routes, if I go to this routing guide, I should see comments path. So for the index action, Rails generates a little method that internally references this idea that like the comments path is /comments. So rather than having to refer very specifically to /comments, we can just be a little bit more semantic and a little Railsy and say this is just the path for all of the comments, which is the index of all of the comments. So this is telling me that I should be able to go to /comments, the comments path, and everything should be good. But the minute that I want to do nested routes, this breaks. Why does this break? Because the path helpers have changed, right? So now you saw comments path jumped to post comments path. So now comments don't ever exist by themselves. They only exist in the context of a post. So we literally like changed the methods that got auto-generated, so that method no longer exists. So before it was dynamically generated, when I used that resourceful route, now that path helper, that method that I'm calling, has literally changed, but it still exists in my view. So let's take a look at the view. So I have this index view. Basically what this index view is it takes an active record blog object. Oh, this is the wrong one. I want comments view. So it iterates through each comment object, right? So this should be all of the comments because I'm at the index view. And down here, it generates links to say, show that thing, edit that thing, or destroy that thing. And when it generates the links, it uses these path helpers. So what was the path helper that we blew up on? Link to show comment. So when we give the link to helper, this comment object, we're calling on that path helper, and that path helper no longer exists because comments don't exist on their own anymore. There is no route that maps to an individual comment. Is everybody with me? Okay. All right, so what is there now? So we don't want to be able to see a comment just like by itself. We want to see either like all of the comments for a specific post or a comment on a specific post or something like that. So when we say the show action for a specific comment, really we're saying this comment that belongs to a specific post. So our new helper is a little bit more complicated. Our new helper requires that we tell it which post we're talking about, and that'll help us generate the actual path. So I can just come in here and look at my guide and say, okay, what was this path helper that was auto-generated? And then I can come in here and say, it's not just the comment by itself, right? It's the post and the comment. So I'm saying, show me like this particular post. So which particular post, which particular comment, this particular comment, along with, that should be tied to a specific post. So I'm using @post. And if I'm in the view, where do instance variables in the view come from? Controller. So I have to set this in the controller now. So let's look at the comments controller. So I'm in the index action. I still have my instance variable @comments, but also now I need to get a post object. So I want to find the specific post that all of these comments are related to. In the index action, same thing. In the show action. And then the question is like, how do I find the specific post that I am looking for in the index or the show action? So by the ID for sure. And how am I going to figure out which ID I'm talking about?
The show is easy.
It's definitely in the parameters. So let's do this. Let's put pry in here. We'll go to the post one comments index action. We should hit pry. So now we're in the index action, right? So it's probably going to be in the parameters, right? Dylan said it's probably going to be an ID. So we have this post ID in the parameters. So that's awesome. That's more Rails magic, right? So Rails just magically knew I wanted the first post, right? So how's that possible? Right? This is clearly not a magic trick. I'm not as good as Gian.
Is it maybe, big maybe, because there's an association between the comments and the post? So by knowing,
It definitely is because of that.
because it knows with the comment, it should already know what the post it is.
Yeah, so it should, but how does it? Where do params come from?
Wait, because you put in one from the URL.
Yes, params either come from the URL or the body of the post. Forever and always, params come from the URL or the body of the post. That's the only way we can communicate information in between requests. So if we look at the URL that I just put in, what's the URL? 1, right? So it's not random. I put in the number 1, and then the number 1 came through. So if I do this again, and I put in the number 2, what do we expect to see in the parameters? 2, right? So always these parameters are getting passed through in the URL. The question is like, how did Rails know to take this out and put it in a parameter called post ID? Is that magic? Why did it not put it in with a key of banana? Or comment ID? Or Flatiron School?
Isn't the roots
Yes.
specified with ID?
Yes. The routes tell us how Rails is going to parse this stuff. So if we look at the route that I'm going to the post comments path. So all of the comments, the index of all the comments for a particular post. So this comes from Sinatra, right? Same exact routing language, /posts, and then anything after that, right? A wildcard character, something, and then /comments. So Rails said, this was the route you told me, right? Even though it's auto-generated, it's exactly as if we wrote out all these routes. It says, okay, I'm going to put whatever is in between /post/ and /comments into this parameter called post ID, right? So that's exactly what it did, right? It looked at the match. It saw 2 here. It said 2 is that wildcard thing you told me about. You told me the key was going to be post ID, and then I matched /comments after that. Does that make sense? So none of this is magic, right? We generated the route. We entered something into the URL, and then Rails just said, oh, okay, you told me the route, right? I matched it, and then I pulled that out for you. All of this is convention, but no magic. All right, cool. So now we know how to find which post we're talking about. So I should be able to say params post ID. So I'm going to do this here. I'll do it in show. Probably need to do it in YouTube. Yeah. All right, cool.
Is there a way to automatically do that?
Uh,
To paste it on
No, I mean, we used this before action, basically to run something before a set of actions. So I guess the answer is yes, there is a way to sort of automatically do it. It's not automatic, but we could write a new before action, and we could call it set post or set post ID or something like that. And we could say only do that for the set of whichever ones we want it to run on. Right, so right now I'm using index, edit, show, new, and this may be superfluous. And then we could put it down here, we could write our method and say set post, and then we could get rid of this everywhere. And now our code's a little drier. It's a little drier, but now it's a little bit more like obscure, a little bit harder to follow. So now, before any of these actions run, right, we're going to run this method down here, and that's going to set the post. I'm going to go back to the way I had it just because I want to make sure everything is as clear as possible, less magical, but we could definitely do that. Yes?
You were talking about Reddit. Like on Reddit, comments can be like nested inside of other comments. Is it possible to do that with Rails? Just like have infinitely nested comments inside of comments?
Yeah, it's very complicated though. In a SQL table, it's not a natural way to do things. There are nice gems that people have written to make it like super easy. The data model is just like very weird, but it's totally doable. Okay, cool. So now I'm at the index action, right? I'm looking at my view. So now I can say the comments path that I'm talking about is for this specific comment, right? This object that's getting iterated over, and this post object that I set in the controller, which I pass through in the URL. So this is going to be a link to this specific post, its specific comments. And then similar here, I have to change this path helper. It's not just edit comment path. Now it is edit post comment path. And so I have to tell it which post I am editing the comment for. So that's at post. And then a link to destroy the comment. Oh, no helper there? Let's get rid of this for a second. So let's see if this works now. Link to, oh, there's one more at the bottom. Our new comment path. We have to change that path helper. So now it's new post comment path. And we have to tell it which post. Cool. So now I can see all of the comments on a specific post, right? So before I had, like, in theory, some long list of comments, and now I've scoped it to be just one post. So now if I look at these links, oh, these links are not good. So this looks right. So this is the first post. You can see the link down here, if you don't know what I'm looking at. So this is the first post, the comments collection, the first comment, and I want to edit it. If I look at my show, though, I did something wrong in show because I'm getting the first post, the first comment, but .1. It should, our show should be post ID, right? Post 1, comments 1. Not sure why we're getting .4 rather than /4. So let's look at, this is for show. I'm giving it the post comment path. So post comments path would be comments plural, right? The index. I want the show, so the path helper is post comment path singular for show. It's post comments path for the index. And that should fix this so that we're pointing at showing the particular comment. So now we can go here, right? And basically, like, once we do this nested resources thing, everything is going to kind of break because all of this, the path helpers that we auto-generated when we did the scaffold, now are all nested inside of a post, and there's no notion of a comment on its own. One thing that we can do to fix this is we can add more routes. So it's possible that in your application you might say, hey, comments, really, they never exist outside of posts. But maybe you think that comments exist nested under posts, and that makes sense. But also, they sometimes, maybe you just want to look at an individual comment, and it doesn't need to be nested under a post. In which case, we could do this. We can come to the routes, and we could say, hey, Rails, can you generate me routes for comments on their own? Oh, whoops. Like that. So now I'm saying, Rails, generate routes for comments nested inside of posts, and generate routes for comments on their own. The nice thing about this is going to fix all of those path helpers that have now broken because they only we told it comments only exist inside of posts. So now we're basically saying comments exist on their own. They could exist on their own, or they could also exist in this sort of nested world. So I should be able to just reload, and now everything magically works. So let's kind of like take a step back and see if anything that I've done actually makes sense. So what's your guys' opinion on like comments in posts? Like, should comments ever exist on their own, like in this world, or should they only exist inside the context of a post? Okay, and would you say that for all actions, or just like a subset of the actions?
All actions regarding as like a show.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is maybe comments don't. Sorry, go ahead.
I feel like comments, like for example, on like a WordPress blog, sometimes you want to like moderate comments. And in that case, it might be helpful to have them outside the context of the post, like just to approve whether this is cool or not, like in your admin panel.
Yeah, so I actually think that like for different actions, it kind of makes different levels of sense. So I'm like pretty strong on the idea that for the index action, it doesn't really ever make sense to see the list of all comments. That just seems silly to me. So we could go here, right? Now we have a route for /comments. So now we can see all comments, except, well, we're gonna get that problem. So now we could see all comments if I were to fix this without context, right? But I don't really ever think it makes sense without saying, okay, what are the comments for this specific post? But if I want to edit a specific comment, when I go to the edit route, like to me, it makes sense that I would be able to edit a comment without knowing, like in the URL, what post it's necessarily associated with. Like when I'm sort of like looking at all of the comments on a post, it makes sense to me that these two things are associated. But maybe when I'm editing them, I'm just looking at like the comment itself. So maybe it makes sense that edit exists outside the scope of a post. And maybe there's other actions as well. So if we look at the Rails guide, they do this thing called shallow nesting. So what Rails kind of argues is really what ends up happening is a lot of times when you have this sort of nested resource, for the index action, for the new action, and for the create action, those things, it really makes sense to know what the post is that these comments are associated with. But maybe for the show action, right, if you're just looking at the comment, the edit action, if you're just editing a comment, if you're just updating it or destroying it, you don't really need to know anything about like what the post actually is. So what we can do is we can come into our routes and we can do, so this is like the literal way to write this. So here we're saying, okay, I want to nest comments for the index, new, and create actions, and I want to create them as like their own resource for show, edit, update, and destroy. And Rails has this nice little helper for that to write shallow true. I'll do the more explicit way so that it's clear. Okay, so now we're gonna have to go through and like work out which of our path helpers still work, and then hopefully we can get to what I think is the most important part, which is like actually creating new comments for a specific post, which is kind of like the whole purpose of this. All right, so let's see what our new routes are. So now I should have comments, the edit, show, update, and destroy all live by themselves, right, without an associated post in the URL. And for index, create, and new, I have to know what the post is that is associated with these guys. So let me change my controller. So in my comments controller now, for the index, I still need to find the particular post. What else? For the index, the create and the new. So for index and new, we can get rid of it for show, we can get rid of it for edit, and create I'll leave alone for a minute. All right, so let's see if we can go back to all the comments for a post. So I'm going to change this back now in the index. So I changed this initially when I was in the index view to post comment path. I'm going to send it back to just a comment path for a specific comment. I changed this from edit comment path to edit post comment path. And my new comment path, I made new post comment path. So I'm just going back to what I originally had. Yes?
Does this have any bearing outside of just routing? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you made like a website that uses JavaScript to just interact with this in JSON, like this is just a routing issue. Okay. Whereas the other thing we were doing with the forms, what do you call that?
Accepts nested attributes.
Yeah, that's more of a model thing. So it's separate from the.
Yeah, so these are really like two similar but very different concepts. I would say accepts nested attributes is really like very focused on the model layer, but it does change how fields for works, and fields for is how we use the helper that we use to generate the view. So this is still kind of like working, accepts nested attributes is still kind of concerned with the view layer. It's going to change what's going to get sent along, all of that sort of stuff. But nested resources, we're essentially messing only with the URLs. And then we're going to use those URLs when we submit the form to figure out which objects to like create and associate and that sort of thing. All right, let's see if we can reload this now. So we should, nope, new comment path. So I need, nope. Let's see. Got my new comment path helper wrong. Oh, right. So we kept new, this one stayed. New post comment path. So we said new, we still care about it being nested. All right, so all of this hopefully has made like a little bit of sense. All this has been like a little abstract. The point of all of this for me is really like when you want to create a new thing, how does that work? And so that's really what I'm getting at when I say nested resources versus accepts nested attributes. So when we're actually creating stuff, what happens? So creating stuff is always the combination of a GET request to the new action and then a post of that form. So I want to go to the post one comments new. So I want to be able to say I'm creating a new comment for a particular post. So this is a case where it definitely matters to us that this comment like does not make sense outside of the context of a specific post, right? I can't make a new comment if I don't know what am I commenting on. So definitely like this is one where we definitely need to know which post, right? And why do we need to know which post? Well, the first thing that we need to do is we need to generate a form that's going to allow us to edit a specific post. So what is the thing in the form that we care about? The action and what else? And the method. So in the form tag, every time we generate a form, the most important thing is the action and the method. So how do we generate the action and the method? We're going to leverage form for. So this is still my scaffold. So my form for comments is here. So this is just the scaffold. I'm going to delete the error stuff. So this is just a little bit cleaner. So I need to send along this form, and I want the action of the form to be sending to where? To, so create is going to be post ID comments. So when I send this form along, I don't want to send it to just /comments, because I'm not just creating a new comment that doesn't know who it belongs to. I need to let it know this new comment is related to a specific post. So the action of the form is like the most important thing that's going to happen here. So right now, my scaffolds generated this form for @comment. It's just saying, I'm going to generate this form for a comment, but I don't know about the post that we need to send this along for. So what we can do is change how form for works, and we can tell form for, it's not just a comment that you're generating this form for, it's really two objects, the post and the comment object. And where do those come from? The action. All instance variables in the view come from the controller's action, right? So I'm in the new action, so I set @post and @comment. So comment is an empty comment, and post is an existing post, right? How did I know which post that I want to change? It's in the route, right? The params post ID tells me which post I'm changing, right? So if I go to post 1 comments new, I'm making a comment on the first post. If I go to 2 comments new, I'm making a comment on the second post. And I don't have any second posts. Cool. All right, so I fixed my form. I'm pretty close now. And now it's telling me, so I'm in the new view of my comment. So here's my new view. So I render the form. Looks like the form is rendering properly now. And now it's telling me I have this error, comments path does not work. Does anybody know where comments path comes from? The routes, for sure. So the routes define our path helpers, right? So when we first did this, we had a comments path that was the index of all comments. Now we have a comments path that's related to an individual post, right? We said we don't think of comments anymore, the index of them at least being unrelated to a post. It has to be related to a post. So in this new, I have to change it to, what is it, post comments path? Yeah, post comments path, and I have to tell it what post I'm talking about, so that when it generates the link at the bottom of the page, this back button, I want to go back to all of the comments for this particular post. And I could just totally get rid of this, right? Like I'm writing this ERB, I could just delete this, come back, it'll work. But if I want a back button and I want my users to be able to navigate around my app, the scaffold tells me that like the standard UI is that it would be nice if when I'm on the new action and I'm about to make a new comment, I could say, actually I don't want to make a new comment, I want to go back. Where do I want to go back to? All of the comments for this particular post, right? Not to all of the comments, not anywhere else. Yeah, yeah. So this is like one of the principles of REST is that like nobody has to know anything about any of the URLs in your application. You let the user know at every stage what they can do next, and they can do whatever they want just by clicking on links, and you generate those links. And so it's kind of like a trail of breadcrumbs. Every time they click on a link, you give them a new page with a whole new set of links, which say here are the set of things that you can do using all of our sort of like RESTful routing. All right, cool. So this was we're driving here the whole time. Yeah.
Something I don't understand completely is because regularly your paths had no arguments, but every time you nested, it gains an argument.
Yep. You're talking about the path helpers, like this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before I was just saying comments path. So the comments path, this is a Ruby method, right? That should generate HTML. So the goal of this is it should generate HTML that tells the app, route somebody to /comments. So that's the comments path, right? The index of all comments. Now I'm telling it, don't just go to all the comments, go to post 1 comments, right? But how does it know that I want to send it to the first post, right? The only way it could know is if the argument to this method, post comments path, was which post. So this is a specific active record object with an ID, and so what it does under the hood is it just calls ID on that post. So it's literally like I'm passing the argument 1 or 2 or 3. So anytime anytime Rails can't guess something in the URL, you have to be giving it the object and saying, this is the ID of the thing that you need to like put into your big string. Because it can figure out post or posts. It just can't figure out this. Great question. Right, so I have post comments path, and then I'm passing it my post. Did I screw it up? Oh, thank you. Cool. All right, so all of this crap, everything that I've been talking about has kind of been getting to this, right? How do I create new things? So before I was saying accepts nested attributes is great for when I want to create all of the things at the same time. This is the case where I already have the parent thing, right, the post, and I want to create something in the child collection, right? So I want to know which post am I talking about, right? Before, when I was using accepts nested attributes, I was just using like the main post resource, kind of sending everything to the post controller, and then saying, hey, post controller, you know how to make, not posts, it was people. I was saying, hey, people controller, you know how to make shirts also. And so the big difference there is, did we have the person already, or were we creating the person and the shirts at the same time? So if we're doing both at the same time, accepts nested attributes. If we already have the parent object, then we need to encode the information about which post or which person or which parent object are we talking about. So when we send this form along, we can create new child objects for that parent object. So I'm going to make a new comment. This I'm going to need to fix. So right now, in the form, I'm sending along the post ID because of the scaffold. So here you can see this is going to come through as comment post ID, which is not that helpful to me because when I post this form is going to post to posts1 comments. So I'll already have the ID of the post in the URL. I don't need to also encode it into the form and make somebody tell me which post, right? Because this introduces the idea that somebody has to figure out, like by looking at the URL, which post is this comment for, right? So you don't want your user having to figure that out. You want it to just like be auto-generated into where the form posts, right? And have it be in the URL and have everything just work without having the user to have to figure that out. So let's take that out of the form. Yeah.
If that's your action is sending it to in that ID1, and that's telling it the ID of like 3, does it get weird when?
Yeah. So let's see what happens. If I just send the form like this, let's see what happens. So I have Brian here. No.
I'm going to assume the action will take priority, but I don't know.
So I'll say post 4, but it's going to post to post1 comments. Does anyone I can't talk. Does anybody have a guess as to what's going to be in the parameters? I'm going to post the form to post1 comments, and I'm also sending along a comment post ID. What are the parameters going to look like?
It's going to be content post ID, comment ID.
Say that again?
Comment or content post ID.
What's content?
Like whatever's in the content.
Oh, got it. Content, yeah.
Whatever. And then the post ID and the comment ID too.
Okay. Other guesses? Nobody else? All right. Well, let's see what happens. Yeah, go for it.
I think it's gonna post like to 1. Well, let's say 1 is saving something to like your database. Let's just say it'll save to the 3rd column of the database.
Okay. So here's the way we could know before we do it. We're going to send a post to post1 comments, right? So we can look at the route and see. So right now, a post to post1 comments is going to take whatever is here and put it into a key called post ID. So in the parameters, we should have a top-level key called post ID, and that should be 1. Additionally, we should have a key of comment, which comes from here, right? And that key is going to point to a hash that has content as a key and post ID as a key. So let's submit that and see if I'm full of shit. Okay, so we have comment as a top level key, and it points to a hash that has content as a key and post ID pointing to 3 and whatever, and those came from what was entered in the form. Right, so those came from the inputs in the form. Additionally, from the URL, we pulled out the post ID, which was the number 1. So all of the stuff that was in the form, because of how we nested it in the name attributes, came through as a comment key, and post ID came from our route that we looked at here, since we sent a post to post 1 comments. So the whole purpose of this is it would be nice to be able to say, okay, post.comments.create or something to that effect, right? And be able to say, let me pass in params comment. And so that is going to create a comment on this particular post. But we don't know which post, right? So the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to be able to say post equals post.find. And how will we know which post we're creating this comment for? From the post ID, right? So we can look in the params and say, let me find this post ID, right? So now we know which post we're talking about. And now we need to create the comments on this particular post. And I would love to be able to say, hey, here's the information for this comment. I think this is going to error because we have strong params now. So really what I have to do is call comment params, right? So now I can say post.comments.create comment params. And now I found the right post, and I created a comment that was associated with that post. That was the whole goal of this. So I'm going to write this into my controller. So I have the post that I need to find. It comes from the post ID, which comes from the URL. So this was a post to /post/ID. So for example, 1 comments, right? And it put it in this post ID because of how we did our nested routes. And then we can say, it's not that I'm making a new comment, it's making a new comment off of the comment, off of the post. So this is how I create associations when a post already exists, or when the parent object already exists, using nested resources. So let me get rid of pry, and then we are going to redirect to no longer to just that comment. Oh, actually, I think the show should still work for a comment. So let's see. All right, so let's make another comment. Let's get rid of that post thing. Where is it? So we'll get rid of post ID, right? Because we don't need this, right? It's getting passed through the URL. We'll reload this. We'll have a new comment. We're going to create that comment. And after we create the comment in our controller, typically what we do after we create an object is we ask the browser to send us a redirect. So I told it to send us to redirect to @comment. So what path is @comment? What URL does @comment represent?
Comments, index comments, and user ID, comment ID.
So basically what we're saying here is this is a specific comment, right? This is the comment that I just created. So what I need to do is I need to save the comment when I create it so that I can tell Rails, hey, send the user to this comment that I just created. And these don't need to be instance variables anymore because we're not going to render a template. We're going to redirect. So I'm going to redirect to the comment. So let's see if that works now. Undefined method comment for posts. Interesting. Here? Oh, sorry. Comments plural. Now we get undefined method save for no class. I'm just going to leave this as an instance variable. For a second. Undefined. Okay, so now I get undefined local variable or method comments path from show. So what happened was, yes?
I was just wondering, and this is the problem, but how does it know that how would it know that it nested the comment under a post when you redirect?
So it wouldn't.
Right, so is that the problem?
No, but close. So at comment now is a comment that is not nested under a post. And when we made our routes, we said certain things we think only make sense in the context of posts, certain things we don't. And we said show, we don't necessarily need to know which post a comment is related to when we're just showing that comment. So I'm leveraging that inside here and saying, okay, after you create a comment on a specific post, I'm happy to just show you the comment you created, and you don't necessarily need to know anything about the post.
What if you wanted to?
If you wanted to, yeah, you could absolutely do
How
that.
would you redirect?
So if you wanted to redirect, let's say to like that.
Comments, yeah.
So then we would need to, in our route, we would say, yeah. Although this is going to break a bunch of our other helpers, we have to go.
Would it just know that the path to show it now is under that?
No, so then we would have to give it both objects, and we'd have to say redirect to post comments path. Make this, or make this. I'm going to move it back because it's going to break a whole bunch of other path helpers. All right, so I'm telling it, go to the comments path, right? So, comment path for this specific comment, which is the same as just telling it, go to this specific comment. Rails is smart enough to figure out that if I'm doing that, it means go to the show path of that. If you want to be a little bit more explicit, you could say go to the comment path and use that helper. Which comment? This one. So I'm at the show action for this comment now, and now I'm getting undefined local variable or method comments path. So what's happening now is I'm back in show. So I've redirected and I've said, hey, show me this particular comment. So let's look at show. In show, I do set comment, so I should be running this down here. I'm going to copy it up there just for clarity's sake. So I have the comment, right? And now I come into the show action. So we haven't looked at the show action in a while. So here's the path helpers that are in the show action. So I have the edit comment path and the comments path. And the one that it's complaining about is the comments path. Does anybody know why it's complaining about the comments path? I know this is super boring, but I promise you, you're all going to be really sad if you don't understand this.
Really tough for that.
So where does this come from? The routes. Okay, so yep. So we changed it, right? Originally we just said It was the comments path, right? We can look at the routes and we can say there is no more comments path, right? We said comments only exist in the context of a post. Right? We don't ever want to just see all the comments. We want to see all the comments for a post. So in my view, if I'm referencing all of the comments, it's going to break, right? So I have to say it's all of the comments for a specific post. Which post? The post that I told you in the controller. But I didn't tell you anything in the controller, right? So I have to come back into show and say which comment, which post, am I in show? Yes, I am in show, right? What's my URL for this? So I am in the show action comments show. So I don't have a post, so I am screwed. So I was coming in here and saying, okay, like I'm in the show action. Let me just grab the comment out of the URL. But we said that we can show something without worrying about the post. So we have to change the path helper. We have to say we don't ever have a post for you in the show. So we don't want to go back to the post comments path. We want to go back to probably maybe back to maybe back to home. I don't know. There's not really a good place to go back to because our URL when we're here is comment 8. So we're at the 8th comment and we went here without knowing which post this comment was related to. One thing we could do is we could put this back. Is there any way that we could figure out what post a comment belongs to using Active Record? Yeah, how? Yeah, right. So we want to tell it, hey, there's a specific post and a specific comment, right? So all of the, or sorry, not a specific comment, all of the comments for a specific post. And we have a specific comment at comment that we're working with. So the post path for that comment is just comment.post. So comment is an Active Record object. I can just ask it like, you belong to a specific post. Which post is that? You could call out to its ID method, but Active Record and Rails is smart enough to figure out that you're essentially passing it this post object. This post object has an ID. And we should be able to figure out, nope. Oh, I never did that in the model. So comment belongs to a post. Mendel also suggested the more literal post ID, right? A comment has a post ID, that would totally work, and then I wouldn't need to make that association. So I could do it like this. Now the back button points to post1 comments, or I could do at comment.post, right, which is going to leverage the belongs to association I just created. I could also do at comment.post.id, get the post object, ask for its ID method. That would work too. Basically, all I need to know is what's the ID of the post, right, and give that to Rails, so Rails knows how to generate that URL.
So if you did comment.post, would it be going through the database again?
If I did comment.post, yeah. So this is 2 database calls. No, this is 1 database call. So I already had at comment. I call the post method. So this is 1 database call. If I called ID on that, I already have the object, and I'm just reading from the object. If I do post ID, that's slightly faster technically because I have the comment and I'm just reading off of it. So in this case, I'm going to the database 1 less time. Genius. Cool. So to recap, the whole point of this was just trying to think about like what should your URLs be, right? And making the case for why they should be one way versus another, right? So we started off with everything where comments existed just in the wild, right? Like all by themselves. And then I made the argument to you that it doesn't really make sense in most cases for comments to exist without some context, right? So this idea of nested resources gives us a little bit more context, both in terms of showing pages that are like scoped, that start to make sense. And then also when you create new things, you've encoded that information in the URL so that you know I'm creating comments for this specific post. And that's opposed to somewhat accepting nested attributes where you're saying, okay, I want to create all of these things at once. There's a whole bunch of objects I need to create. These things are associated. Using accepts nested attributes works better in that situation. So two different ways to create objects. One where the parent object exists, one where it doesn't, and you're creating everything at the same time. Last thing I want to ask you guys, let's just like weigh in on a couple of different ways you could like design your URLs. So my app looks like this. Here's my URLs. Essentially, like I have like /publishers, right? So that could be like Gawker, right? So maybe publishers 1 is Gawker, right? Then I have like blogs. So I said that could be like Lifehacker. What's the main Gawker blog called? Just Gawker?
Yes.
So we'll call this Gawker Media. Gawker, and then I have posts, right? Like how to be a baller programmer, and like other posts, right? And then I have comments. You suck. You'll never make it. You wish you were a Flatiron student. What's that?
PG, that's clean.
Yeah.
Very
Well,
nice people.
I'm recording right now. So this is basically like kind of all of my resources, right, from top to bottom. So you can make the argument that maybe all my URLs should look like this. Anytime I go to a post, right, it should be publishers 1, blogs, maybe blog number 2, right? This is the Gawker main blog, posts 17. Comments. So if I want to see all the comments for the 17th post on the Gawker blog of Gawker Media, this should be my URL, right? This is like the RESTful URL for this particular set of comments, right? Does this make sense? Okay. So this is one way to do it, right? And if I were to make a GET request to this URL and I had done my nested resourceful routes, I would get all this information into the controller. I'd get publish ID, I'd get blog ID, I'd get post ID, and I'd be able to access like all of that stuff in the database. And maybe I need that stuff. But maybe I don't, right? So it seems like I was able to build this whole application without any of this information. So why is it that I don't need this information? Like, why is that superfluous? Or maybe it's not superfluous. Maybe I've been building it wrong the whole time. So there's two different ways I can make URLs, right? Right now, every URL that we talked about looked like this, right? With just posts and comments. But I'm missing all this information, right? About which blog all this stuff is attached to, and which blog empire, which publisher it's attached to. Which is better? Like, should I have this short URL or should I have this longer URL that has all this information in it? And why?
Both.
Both? Alex?
I think you should have the short URL because when you're looking at a URL, you don't necessarily need to know all the other information as long as you do on the back end.
Okay. Why don't I need to know all that stuff on the back end? Isn't it important to know that these posts are related to a specific blog and which publisher it's attached to? As a programmer, as like a server side programmer. Keep going. Say that again.
Those would all be an object when you create a post. When you create a new post for something, it knows which. When you create a new comment for a post, it knows which, it knows the object that you're going from.
How does it know? You're right. I'm just asking you.
Yeah, I know.
Association, right?
Yeah. Because of
Comments
association.
already knows it's post ID.
Absolutely.
Already knows it's blog ID.
So let's
Like it just
so let's go back into create. So all we did, right, when we posted a new comment was we posted to post one comments, right? So we left out all that other information, and I'm making the argument we're like losing all this information. How do we know this stuff? And Lewis said because of the association, right? So when we come into Pry, we have our params, right? So there's some stuff we need to know, right? Which post are we talking about? But once we find out which post we're talking about, from that post, we can find out everything else we need to know, right? Because of associations. Right? I can ask a post what blog it belongs to, right? And because I've poorly seeded my data, I come back with nil, but, you know, in theory, right, there would be a blog. So let's make one. Can you do that? Oh yeah, you can do post.build blog, right? I never used that. I don't know why. I don't think so.
no, that was just me.
Blog, okay, so post.build blog. So we need a publisher ID, which will be 1, and a name, which will be Gawker main. Okay, cool. So I built a blog off this post, right? So now I should be able to ask this post, which blog do you belong to? And it tells me Gawker, right? I need the main publisher. I don't think I ever put that into the database, so I'll call build publisher. And wait, let me just ask what it, fuck. Sorry. Publisher has post equals post find brands post ID post.blog post.blog.publisher create publisher, and I need a name, which is Gawker, and that's it, right? Cool. All right, so what I was saying before, now that I've like seeded my database, right, was I know how to find the post. The post comes from the params in my URL, but that's the only parameter that I need. Everything else is just encoded already into my database, right? So I should be able to ask the post, what blog do you belong to? I should be able to ask the blog, what publisher do you belong to? So that whole chain is already in the database. So I don't need to be passing all that data wrong in the URLs. So again, right, here's the whole structure of the application from top to bottom. And what I'm saying is I could, if every time I did anything, I could encode everything that's like kind of above this object into the URL, but it's kind of a pain to work with. I'd have to have this super deep nesting. Every time I created one of those comment helpers, it'd be like publishers, blogs, posts, comments path, which would be just like madness to write every time, and you'd have to pass it each individual object in every single helper. So our general guideline is never more than, so this guy Jameis Buck a long time ago wrote this article that they actually put into the guide because it was just like such a good rule of thumb. He says never nest more than 2 levels deep. So he says this is too much. only go with the minimum that you need to be able to figure out the rest of the chain. So the only thing that I really need to know is which post, right? I'm making a new comment, so I don't need to know the comment's ID because the comment doesn't have an ID yet. So in the most case, I would be asking which comment to which post. But I never need to know anything more than that because everything else is already encoded in the URL.
So when you asked the question at the start, I said both. How hard is it to like make both work? Like, what if you really wanted to like?
Yeah, so it's not, and that's kind of like what I was getting at with this, right? We did both, but we just split them. The only annoying thing when you do both is if I have it nested and unnested, then you can hit the same controller action from two different paths. So if I say I want to be able to go to the comments index outside of the context of a post, and now if I look at the comments action,
I mean, I mean, like.
oh, what do you mean?
I mean, like the publisher thing. Like, what if you want to be able to write from publisher to blog to post to?
Oh, yeah, you can do that. It's really, really painful. Because every single path helper you have everywhere, you have to pull every action in your controller. You'll have to pull every object out of the parameters. You could probably write like some metaprogramming thing that would do that. And then every path helper, you'd have to like have those super long ones and pass at each of the individual objects. Your form fors will want all of the objects so that when you post, it knows how to create the right URL. It's like really, really painful, but it's definitely doable. And people will think you're an idiot because it's like not the convention. So.
Didn't you go over another reason why not to do that is like people can read a bunch about obviously a blog is
Yep. Yeah, so Zalman's point the other day was from a user, from a what do you call it? UI, from UX perspective, this is just ugly, right? Like A, I don't want to see that in a URL, and B, now people know that like the entire structure of my database, and if they wanted, they could now crawl basically every page in my application because the longer the URL I have, I'm also telling them every URL that's shorter than and every index in the database. Which if you're worried about people just sort of DDoSing you or spidering your pages or stealing your content or anything like that, you're really exposing a lot about how your application works here with no real benefit.
How hard is it to get to like to not to be able to just remove the IDs and just use subs?
Oh, there's a gem that will do it for you, so not hard. And if you wanted to do it yourself, it's that simple also. I've just never done it because I've never like taken an application to a level where I'm like I care enough about like, you know, it's always been for fun. All right, I know this is like super tedious and super boring, but this is probably the most important thing we've talked about so far. When you start building your applications, this will be what you're banging your head against all the time.
The hard part for me with this is like, as you were doing it, it's like I want to go on this path, but it would break certain things, and you fix that, and you're going down that same path, and then broke other things. Like it makes me
Hard
feel
to
like
follow.
it's hard to follow,
Yeah.
right? So it makes me feel like I don't know if I'm going down the right path or if I'm just because like it breaks things that were working.
Right.
But it's supposed to do that. 'Cause that's what like intentional. Like
Yep.
it makes me feel like I don't know if I'm breaking the right thing.
Yeah, so I mean that's I guess what I was trying to get across here is, particularly because we send you down this very like RSpec driven path, you guys almost use your brain like not at all. Like you never think like what's the intent, right?
Like,
a lot of
the
times
vision of the app.
you don't read the README, you don't load things in the browser, like you don't even know what the app looks like, but you're like my test pass, and you don't think about like what does this page look like, or why is this page doing this thing, or what was like the original intent of the lab. So like what I'm trying to do here is say like, I mean, what if we actually wanted to do something, right? And we were like thinking with our heads and we're like, we want to make comments that are related to posts, right? How would we do that? Well, we'd start with this scaffold, and then when we changed the scaffold, a lot of things would break, and we'd expect them to break because we're doing something different. And if we know what we want to do, that's what I'm saying, like all of these things, like these little path helpers, you can just delete them if they break, because who gives a shit, right? It's your app. It's just a link. If you think the link should be there, put it there. If you don't, delete it, right? If it's causing you a bunch of pain, just delete it, whatever. And I changed them, and I kept saying, like, okay, well, maybe we think that, like, this is a world where comments don't exist without posts, but maybe we have an app where comments can exist without posts, and if so, then, like, my routing is all wrong. There's no wrong or right anymore. That's kind of like where we are now, is like, you guys need to start thinking about, why are we doing things, right? Whatever links you want to put on the page, awesome, right? However you want to structure things. And so that's like asking this question, you know, which is the right way to do it? There's no right way. It just like depends on what's your goal. As long as however you construct it achieves the goal, then none of it really matters. And so hopefully, like, as you go through, if you ask yourself, what is this doing? Then you can say, okay, is it okay to delete it? But I think a lot of times you guys just like, you use these things, and as long as the test pass, it's just like, great. But it's like you have no idea what half of the stuff on the page is. If you start figuring out what's, okay, like everything in my code, I have to like understand what it is, and then you can start getting to the why, and to me the why is the important part. If you can ask why, then that's like, you're there. The syntax is not that hard. But trying to figure out like how to wire all this stuff up, there's so much going on. So you really need to question like every little piece and what's the goal of it. So that's like my hope is like when we do these lectures, is like I can get the why across to you guys. Because if you can get the why, if you can figure out why I'm doing something, then we can figure out any little syntax error.
Could you go after the comment control?
Yeah.
Let's go to the. Cause I remember where you had app comments, and then you wanted to. I mean, you created something from it. Yeah, that one.
Maybe here.
Yeah, what's the value of app comment at that stuff?
So post.comments.create is going to create a new comment. It will automatically fill out the post ID on the comment object, which is why I call post.comments.create rather than just like, I could call comment.create, which would just create like a singular comment, but then I would have to tell it what the post ID is. So this is just like a nice Railsy way of saying, hey, when you create this comment has this post ID. Just do it for me. And then the whole method returns the comment that got created. So this is the new comment that we created that has the post ID of this post. Other questions? Fantastic. All right, let's do Feelings Friday soon and then get the hell out of here.